Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this second issues webinar hosted by the Nebraska Farm Bureau, and certainly we thank all of you for joining us this morning. I know that some of you have had snow. Hopefully most of you have had some moisture in that. We certainly do need more, and always know that snow is a hard way to get moisture, but we'll take it however it comes. We're scheduled to be on for an hour this morning, but we certainly do respect your time, and we'll want to have adequate time for questions, so we'll want to move right along here. And at this point, I'll turn the microphone over to Jay Ferris, who will talk about a few of the details related to the webinar, and then Jessica will take over and start with tax issues. I guess just one first comment that I would make is another thank you to all of you who got involved in the tax issue and made your feelings known to the governor and to your senator and to other senators. Obviously that was very important in our success in getting those bills stopped. I think one of the interesting things is that our message about property tax has been heard, and as there's discussion, and you'll hear more about it here in a little bit, there's discussion about further talks related to tax reform, and everybody talks about including property tax in that. So now the challenge will be ours to help see that we have some good reform related to property tax as we move forward. So again, I turn it back over to Jay and then to Jessica.
Yes, well, good morning, everyone. Just to kind of go over a little bit of the details of the webinar. If you have a question at any time, there are a couple of ways that you can ask that question. First, if you have a microphone at your computer, you can raise your hand. There's a button you can push on your screen, and that will indicate to me that you have a question. I will unmute your line. You can ask your question. The other way is there is a question function on your control panel, and you can simply type your question in. I will see that, and I will read it then to the presenter. Or there also is a chat function that you can direct a question to me, and I can see that and also pass that on. So with that, I believe we are ready. I am going to switch presenters, and Jessica, you will need to click yes, show the screen. There should be something.
Okay.
Okay.
I think we're ready to go. Okay.
Jessica,
good morning, everyone. Just wanted to talk to you a little bit this morning about the governor's tax bill. I guess actually bills. There were two of them, LB 405 and 406. As you know, these bills were introduced at the beginning of the session on the last day of bill introduction, and they would have eliminated and or reduced income taxes depending on which bill you were looking at. To do this, they wanted to increase the sales taxes by removing the taxes that currently exist on exemptions, and for agriculture a lot of that was on ag inputs. There were two hearings on the bills, one on February 6th and one on February 7th. We had a great showing at the hearings. Steve testified on the 6th, and Miles Ramsey came in and testified on the 7th. And we also had several other members just come, and some just to be there and show their support against the bills. Well, support for us, support for farmers, but show that they were there against the bills. And others who actually did get up and testified. And I thought both of those were great, that our members were engaged in that process and willing to come down and spend the time. After those hearings, and I'll just go over a little bit on the sales tax exemptions that would have been removed in the bills. You can see on your screen there the amount, which would have equaled about $280 million. And in the second bill, the majority of that bill was actually agriculture. They exempted manufacturing a little bit, and also some of the other taxes that were proposed, such as the prescription drug or the nonprofits. So that's some of the detail. But just to kind of give you a lay of the land of where we went from the hearing. After the hearing, there were a lot of discussions. Senator Ashford and Senator McCoy were kind of scrambling around, talking to different people. The governor was putting out a lot of feelers in terms of, well, maybe there was a lot of pushback from ag and manufacturing. Maybe I could, get them to come on board if I agree to take ag and manufacturing off the table. Just lots of kind of if this, then this scenarios being presented, various versions of this bill being brought out every other day and trotted to the Omaha World Herald. But I think within about a week, the governor got a pretty clear message that we weren't going to sit down and have this conversation unless it, A, included property taxes, and B, we started from scratch. So then that following week, he agreed to pull the bills, essentially by having Senator McCoy kill them in the committee. So that happened this past week, and the bills are now dead, and there's a proposal to look at studying tax reform perhaps as legislation next year or through some of the bills that are there this year. There's a bill in the executive committee that's LB 613 that's a bill to study the tax structure in the state. I don't know if that's the answer, but it's certainly something that is being talked about, and there's certain groups that have kind of jumped onto that bill and think that that's the vehicle we should use. But there's lots of ways we could approach it. So that is where we are. We certainly very, very much appreciate all the work our members did to get in contact with their senators, to get in contact with members of the Revenue Committee, to share the story of ag and how it would be impacted with their friends and neighbors. This was a really big issue for us and something we weren't expecting to go into the session having to defend, but I think we did a really good job, and we really credit our members for all the work and success we had on that issue. So, be happy to take questions about it when we get to questions after the state part here. So I'm going to turn it over to Jay.
And again, if anybody has any questions at any time, you can simply type that into the question box in your control panel, or you can also raise your hand. There should be a little button that looks like a hand. And if you raise your hand, I'm assuming you have a microphone on your computer or you have dialed in on the phone line. You can also ask questions that way. I just need to unmute you so we can all hear you. With that, I think Jay Rempe's ready.
Thanks, Jay. And moving right along with Jessica's discussion on taxes, as Jessica mentioned, one of the big talking points that we used on the governor's tax package was the lack or the absence, excuse me, of any discussion of property tax relief. And so now it kind of sets the stage as the Revenue Committee is looking to study tax issues and move into the future. It's up to us to throw out some ideas or to make sure that the property tax relief stays on top of their agenda or as part of the discussion. And you'll see a couple of points that we made to the Revenue Committee in Steve's testimony a couple of weeks ago was one that since 2006, taxes statewide on ag land, this is just ag land alone, went up almost 70%. And so that's quite an increase when you're comparing that to other property sectors. The other, we took a look at total property taxes paid not only on ag land, but on ag machinery and equipment, on farmsteads, on farm buildings, and totaled that up, and it right now exceeds $900 million. So agriculture is, if I remember right, total property taxes paid are about $3.2 billion, roughly around a little over $3 billion statewide. And so agriculture in total is paying close to 28-29% of the total, and we're looking at a small segment of the population who's doing that. So those are the couple of points that we used with the Revenue Committee. The ideas that are out there for property tax relief that will be discussed, at least thrown in as ideas and concepts for the Revenue Committee to consider. There's a couple that I'll mention this morning, LB 101 and LB 145. They're both bills that are up for hearing Thursday in front of the Revenue Committee. We worked on LB 101 with Senator Dan Watermeyer to introduce that bill. and then on LB 145 with Senator Lydia Brosh, to introduce that bill. Both bills are very similar. They just tackle the same problem a little differently. The first bill, 101, would reduce ag land values for school tax purposes only. So it wouldn't change anything in the way of counties or NRDs or other local governmental subdivisions, but for school districts, it would reduce the value of ag land that's calculated used to pay property taxes from 75% to 65%, and to phase that in over 5 years. It'd do a couple things then. It would reduce the property taxes paid for schools by agriculture, and then it would in theory make those districts look a little less wealthy for state aid purposes, and in theory would provide some more state aid to those rural districts. Today there are over, I think it's 15 rural school districts that do not receive any state equalization aid, so that would help in that regard. LB 145 is a little broader. It applies to all ag land in terms of it. It would just reduce ag land value straight across the board from 75% to 65%. So it's another way of kind of tackling the problem. And unfortunately, when you're looking at the ag value increases that we've seen over the last few years, basically what it would amount to is be holding our own here maybe for a year, maybe two. So when we've been seeing increases of 10 to 12%, but it's a step in the right direction. A couple other bills there that just I've note of interest. LB 370 would create a fund for property tax assistance for counties and municipalities. It was introduced by Steve Lathrop. It's just kind of a shell bill to have out there for discussion. And then another one, LB 651, introduced by Al Davis, that would eliminate property taxes for community colleges. It's interesting. The senator that's held that seat for as long as I can remember has always introduced that version of that bill. So I think it's kind of tradition for that senator in that district to introduce that bill, and Senator Davis is carrying through. So we'll see how that goes as well. Just real quick, just a couple other budget and tax issues that are out there that will be discussed. One, again, roads funding. If you recall, Senator Fisher a couple years ago introduced a bill to earmark a portion of the sales tax for roads funding. That went into effect this year. There were a lot of groups, particularly education groups and others, that didn't like that earmark. And so there's a bill that's going to be heard in front of the Revenue Committee tomorrow that would remove that earmark or repeal it. And we're part of a coalition of roads interests that will oppose that bill and want to keep that in place. Obviously, state aid to schools is always every year an issue in terms of both the state budget and how do you provide. There's always school districts that have issue with the formula, and so there are 2 or 3 bills that are dealing with that, and the overriding budget issue that will get factored in. And then another bill will throw in sales tax and repair parts. That's always an issue for ag equipment dealers. We had quite a discussion about it at our annual meeting, and our voting delegates indicated that's something they want us to spend a little more priority time on. And there's a bill for that heard next week. It's LB 96, introduced by Senator DuBois in front of the Revenue Committee. How that plays out, my sense is right now that that on all these tax issues, the Revenue Committee is just going to hold on to all these bills for their discussion that they're going to have over the summer and into the fall. But depending on what happens, the Revenue Forecasting Board is scheduled to meet, I believe it's later this week, and if they come out with some rosy numbers for revenues, that might spur some discussion about maybe trying to do some things on a small scale yet this session, so we'll see. Let me just mention a couple other issues. Water. The biggest issue related to water this session is the discussion of funding. LB 517 was introduced by Senator Carlson. The hearing for the bill was last week. We went in and testified in support of the measure. What it would do, it would create a short-lived task force that would pull together the LR 314 study that the Natural Resources Committee just completed. And in that study, it took a broad brush at identifying all the water needs out there for funding. And this task force would take that next step. It would identify, or it would take that list, and it would prioritize those needs and come back to the legislature next year with a plan, if you will, or a roadmap of what needs to be funded immediately and then what can wait a little bit. And then the idea is next year the legislature will discuss how do we go about funding these water needs and put in place a long-term sustainable funding source for water. That bill, there's a lot of discussions going on right now on how to best create that task force, how to best put it, the procedures in place and to make it work. And so, but I think Senator Carlson is pretty serious about trying to move something this session along those lines. There were also a couple bills on inter-DR management that when I put this slide together that were out there, but the bills were killed last week, so I think I'll skip over that in the interest of time right now. And let me finish up real quick with a couple things that are out there we're working on. Anthony in particular spending a lot of time and working with Senator Ken Shields on a bill that he introduced on our behalf to try to spur livestock growth and development in the state, particularly as it relates to livestock-friendly counties. And it would do a couple things. In those counties that have been declared livestock-friendly, it would create an infrastructure fund to help them with any infrastructure development that they need in relate to roads, bridges, those kind of things related to livestock development. And it also, there are some income tax credits present in current law for anybody that invested in a livestock facility. But their caps on those are kind of low and haven't attracted a lot of interest, so it would raise the caps on those income tax credits. The bill was heard a couple weeks ago. We had a great hearing on it. A lot of people came in support. Senator Shields, we've been working with him on whether or not we can continue the momentum and continue to move the bill forward. And then lastly, just there's a host of regulatory issues that we've been dealing with on farm trucks and looking at MAP 21 adoption in the state of Nebraska, on hay hauling issues, particularly in Wyoming and the border crossing there. A bill that has to have hearing that Jessica's been working on is soil testing and one call notification. If you recall, that issue came up a couple of years ago, whether or not when farmers and ranchers do their soil testing, do they need to call the Diggers hotline, and that's still an issue out there. And then there's an issue on trying to look at chemigation fees. The hearing was on that bill last week. Chemigation permit program's been in place since the early 80s. The fees have never been adjusted on that, and the NRDs and DEQ are looking at trying to adjust the fees on that, and we've been working on that as well. And so Jay, that's a quick rundown of some of the state issues we've been working on. I'll just close by saying Thursday the hearing on those revenue committee bills or those property tax bills are up, and we'd certainly encourage any members to come in and testify. Kevin Peterson, a board member from Polk County, is testifying on behalf of Farm Bureau, but we sure want to make a good showing to let the revenue committee know that that property taxes has to be looked at as part of an overall tax discussion, and so we'd certainly invite any members to come in and offer some comments if they wanted to. If they can't, we certainly ask you to send a letter to the revenue committee members and express your concerns about property taxes.
That's right.
Jay?
Yep, and just to add to that, Jay, and we do have a couple of questions here, but we do have an action alert up right now that you can send those messages directly to the Revenue Committee. And also, if you are able to come to Lincoln, we're going to try to meet ahead of time somewhere and do a lunch that we will provide. If anybody can come to Lincoln on that day, just let us know, and we'll let you know where we're planning on meeting, and we'll buy a little sandwich or something so we can go over and enjoy the hearing. So, but we do have a couple of questions. The first one is, and both of these are on tax issues, but the first one is, where does the current tax credit stand for the next year or two?
I'm sorry, the current what?
Current tax credit. I would assume that's property tax.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I went blank there for a little bit. I'm going to get a nod of the head from Jessica here, but I think they're funding them at $112 million right now for the next year. And if I remember right, the governor's budget included that figure for the next 2 years. And the Appropriations Committee is just starting its budgeting process right now, and so we're definitely going to be working with the Appropriations Committee to try to protect those dollars, because there's a lot of folks that have a lot of spending ideas there, and we're going to be working hard for that.
Okay. The next one is also a tax question, and it's how aggressive will Farm Bureau be to get sales tax on food?
You know, that I laughed just a bit because obviously that seems to be attracting a lot of attention right now, and I will tell you this, that we have Steve and I had a couple conversations with the governor shortly after his package came out, and we challenged him on that topic because he had always said sales tax on food was excluded from all his efforts and things. And when we've talked with state senators, we've brought the issue up as well. And I guess our thought is, if we're going to have a discussion and everything has to be, everything should be on the table, then why not include a sales tax on food? And one of the objections is, well, what about the low-income people or people that are on the food stamps program or SNAP program? Well, I think the other states managed to have a sales tax on food and provide some kind of a credit for those people in those situations. So I think we could probably do it here in the state. Yeah, and Steve just pointed out to me, we used to have a sales tax on food here in Nebraska as well. One of the big, just to be blunt, one of the big obstacles to that is Senator Ernie Chambers has always fought sales tax on food, and that's why people that kind of shy away from that discussion.
Okay, are there any other questions? Again, if you do have a question at any time, you can simply click on the little hand icon, and that will tell me to unmute your microphone so we can hear you, or you can also type your question into the question box, and we'll see that and be able to read that. But I am not seeing any other questions at this time, so we're going to go to national issues with Jordan Dux.
Only the fun stuff, I guess. We'll save the fun stuff to the end. Good morning, everyone. Wanted to run through a couple things that I think you all should know about, and we'll talk through them. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to click on the hand, and we'll try to answer them as best as we can. The thing I wanted to focus in on, there we go, is really, I think the first thing I want to hit on is kind of a two-part issue. And the first one is, as you can see, sequestration. And as the title of the slide shows, what role will ag play in the upcoming budget battle? And this is kind of a multi-part question, like I said. And the first one is sequestration. As you've seen a lot in the news, sequestration, or the sequester, has been kind of the main topic that folks have been discussing, whether it be talking heads or politicians in Washington. And just to give a brief rundown, I'll try to remind folks, I'm sure everyone knows what it is by now, but I'll do a brief rundown. Basically, sequestration was a second attempt at trying to trim government spending. Basically, 2 years ago, Congress passed a piece of legislation to try to they tried to raise the debt ceiling, and as a part of that, Republicans wanted spending cuts, real spending cuts, and they came up with a two-tier approach. The first one would be that Congress would form a super committee consisting of both Republicans and Democrats from both the House and the Senate, and they'd come up with $1.2 trillion in cuts over the course of 10 years. If they failed to come to an agreement, then they would then sequestration would kick in, which would be automatic spending cuts of $1.2 trillion over the course of 10 years. As you can imagine, Congress having trouble agreeing on virtually anything, it seems failed to reach an agreement, and so we're stuck with sequestration. Congress has punted this off until March 1st. Again, the total cuts over the course of 10 years will be $1.2 trillion, and for 2013, roughly $85 billion. And this is what we're arguing about. This is where the conversation is this $85 billion for 2013. There are a number of things that are really kind of happening on this. The first one, and I think the major one, is the starter is on the Senate side. House Republicans have passed two pieces of legislation to delay sequestration last year. They have not passed anything this year to delay sequestration. But the Senate is kind of where the game is being fought right now, the Senate and the White House. And so you have Senator Harry Reid, who has introduced his own plan, which will be voted on probably most likely Thursday. It could be voted on as soon as Wednesday, but most likely it will be Thursday. And the plan that he has introduced essentially would come up with would delay sequestration for about 10 months. And he would come up with about the $85 billion through a couple of different ways. The first one would be some spending cuts, half of which would come from defense, totaling about $27.5 billion, and the rest would come from agriculture. and directly from agriculture, and that's it. We'd be looking for defense cuts, and then the elimination of direct payments would be the way that we would delay sequestration for 10 months. And then you couple that with a tax increase of $55 billion for high-income individuals, and we hit the $85 billion number. The interesting thing on this is that agriculture is being asked to absorb the bulk of the cuts on this, again coming from direct payments. Farm Bureau had sent a letter along with 13 other ag groups to Senator Reed, asking him to not, basically asking agriculture to not absorb the larger portion of this, asking him to allow farmers and ranchers the ability to reform their own farm spending programs, because essentially all is happening is the elimination of direct payments under this plan would handicap Farm Bill negotiators as we move forward. Again, where does the Farm Bill fit into this? Really, if the Senate is able to pass and does pass Senator Reed's plan, you would see a very difficult time trying to get a new Farm Bill passed, mainly due to the fact that you would have the biggest portion of budget savings would be taken off the table. If they remove direct payments now and pay for sequestration, it would be very difficult to get any of the reforms that we have been pushing for a very long time, for the past 2 years, on a new Farm Bill. And so we have been opposed to this particular approach, and we hope that as we move forward and we get to this debate, I think it's probably a long shot for this particular plan to receive the 60 votes necessary for passage. The Republicans in the Senate have come up with their own plan as well. It would keep that number about $85 billion in cuts for 2013, but would provide a lot more flexibility to agencies in order to allow those cuts to happen. And everyone keeps talking about that March 1st date, because that's technically when sequestration comes into effect. But the bigger date that folks need to pay attention to is March 27th, and that is when the federal government effectively runs out of money. And so we're going to have to come up with a large spending package again, like we have for the past, it seems, 10 years, but it's been the past 4 or 5 years. We've had to come up with new large omnibus spending bills in order to fund the federal government. We're probably going to have to do the same thing, and that's probably the more important date, because none of these cuts, this $85 billion, the administration has spent a lot of time trying to, in our opinion, trying to scare people. And trying to push that you're going to have long airport lines, we're going to lose a lot of air traffic controllers, we're going to lose 800,000 civilian defense employees, and we will not have, and the most important one to agriculture, we will lose the meat inspection service. So basically meat inspections will come to a halt, and thus the meat packing industry will not be allowed to function. And we just have a hard time seeing that happen and really believing some of these things. It appears that it's a negotiating tactic to try to get Republicans to come to the table because folks are afraid of what might happen. But if you look at the breakdown as to when these cuts would actually take effect, we're looking at 30 to 40, 60 days. The education cuts wouldn't take effect until the next school year. And so, you know, when you look at this, again, the March 1st date on sequestration that you keep hearing, it's when it kicks in, but it's not when the real spending cuts would really kick in, and I think you've got more time. What you most likely will see is the Senate come together and the House come together as well, and they'll work on some sort of large, like I said, omnibus spending bill that would essentially replace sequestration, or at least find some way to allow some more flexible spending cuts as we move forward. And again, going back to the Farm Bill, we've been very focused in on trying to get a Farm Bill passed, like I said, over the past couple years now. And in terms of this larger budget battle, the Farm Bill fits in, you know, in a kind of a difficult situation, because we have been touting over the past couple years that we have, if we eliminate direct payments and do some other changes here and there, we can save anywhere from $23 to $36 billion in Farm Bill spending. And Congress essentially left that on the table last year. And so we were shocked by that. I think we still have a chance to get a Farm Bill done yet this year. But it will be an awfully large fight to try to get a farm bill done, a new 5-year farm bill done. If you talk to farm lawmakers out there, it appears that another extension could be possible. And if you have more questions on that, I can get into that as well. In terms of the larger budget cutting conversation, I think we will have a larger one, and it's going to take place during the omnibus debate. And I think you will see Republicans push for larger programs like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid to be a part of that conversation, and you'll probably see Democrats want to leave those out of any larger budget cutting conversation. So it's going to be if you like politics, if you like one side yelling at the other and the other side not moving, this is what we're going to see over the next couple months. So that's what we're looking at in terms of the budget and sequestration, also the Farm Bill. Going back, as I kind of hit on in terms of the 2013 Farm Bill over on the Senate side, the 2012 bill that was passed by Senator Harris, that was passed in the Senate last year, the complete Senate, was reintroduced again. The same bill. The same programs, the same cuts to direct payments, and a new revenue program. The exact same bill was reintroduced by Senator Harry Reid. The budget numbers will be decided during the budget discussion, whether it be the omnibus debate or as we move forward in a larger budget cutting conversation to replace the sequester or modify it. It doesn't appear that the farm negotiators, the folks on the Senate Ag Committee, will be the ones that decide how much gets cut. And so we'll be paying very close attention. Ag groups and ag state lawmakers have been forced into this larger conversation with the Senate leadership on this to try to make sure that the cuts to agriculture are the ones that we can live with and aren't cutting programs unnecessarily. And the timeline absolutely remains unclear. Again, as I mentioned before, we might be looking at another renewal, another reauthorization of the 2008 Farm Bill again by the end of this year. But it's been very clear, according to the Senate leadership, that direct payments will not survive past 2013. And so where that fits in and how we can, if we get a new farm bill or we, unfortunately, if direct payments are used to fund something else, which we hope they're not, that all timeline and the whole thing of trying to pass it through the Senate, that timeline remains very unclear. Over on the House side, dairy continues to be a big problem, and it is not quite as large of a problem as maybe the spending on the SNAP program. But Speaker Boehner does not like the House House Farm Bill dairy proposal at all. And if you'd like me to get into dairy, I can do that. I'll skip over that for now. If you'd like me to go further into that, I can. But dairy continues to be a larger point of disagreement and one of the major reasons why it did not pass the House last year. And there will continue to be disagreements with the Senate on SNAP cuts. The SNAP program is the largest component of the Farm Bill. The nutrition title continues to be the largest title of the Farm Bill, encompassing almost a little over 80% of overall Farm Bill spending. And so the House has been looking to cut the SNAP program considerably compared to the Senate side, $16 to $4 billion. But if you look at the 10-year spending of that, you try to cut $4 to $16 billion out of a $770 billion program. It doesn't always add up to a whole lot. And the timeline also remains unclear on the House side. I think we're going to probably have more problems like we had last year where the House Ag Committee passed a farm bill in a very bipartisan fashion, and it did not get taken up on the House floor. And I think that there will be a push to try to get an agreement from the Speaker that if the Ag Committee is going to work on getting a farm bill passed through their committee, they want to see it have floor time. And so that's where we're at in terms of the Farm Bill. I wanted to hit on another issue very quickly, and it's immigration. And this is an issue that Farm Bureau has spent a lot of time on, and it's an issue that we will continue to spend a lot of time on. But I believe we can get through all the, there's a lot of questions as to what we deal with the budget, but I think that there's a chance, and I think that a lot of folks in D.C. believe there's a chance to get some actual immigration reform done yet this year. If you remember a couple of weeks ago, there was a bipartisan Senate proposal introduced by Chuck Schumer, Senator Durbin, Senator Menendez and Senator Bennett, as well as Republicans John McCain, Marco Rubio, Jeff Flake, and Senator Lindsey Graham. And the proposal, I'm going to run through it real quick. The idea for it is to try to come up with a path to citizenship for folks who are already here, improve the current system while attracting the world's best individuals, whether it be, I mean, kind of the idea that they focus in on is when you have folks coming into this country to get a PhD or become medical doctors, that you almost have a green card attached to that diploma, trying to attract the world's best and keep them here and have an immigration system that works to allow that to happen. A strong employment verification. Really, if you look at the workforce, whether it be in agriculture or anywhere else, I don't think you'd have any problem finding general agreement that that employers want to have a legal workforce. The problem has been that the federal immigration system makes it extraordinarily difficult to not only verify whether or not someone is here legally, but also work to get that individual, have that individual work through a legal system. And so I think there's going to be work to try to modify the program on that front. And also admitting new workers and protecting the current ones. Those are kind of your main 4 points. They want to try to make sure that workers can continue to come into this country, and then also the folks that are already here find a way, if they are worked within the system, to keep them here. Now, overall, where does ag fit into that? And that's where it kind of comes into the American Farm Bureau proposal. What we have tried to do at the American Farm Bureau level is they've worked with a larger coalition of immigration advocates, agricultural organizations, to come up with a new program, a new guest worker program for agriculture specifically. While in Nebraska, the immigration workforce focuses in more so on the a little bit on the feedlot industry, more so on the meat packing industry. Agriculture is extraordinarily reliant on an immigrant workforce, specifically in states like California with fruits and vegetables, or Michigan with berries and apples and specialty crops. And so what American Farm Bureau is trying to do is come up with a new guest worker program that will be controlled by USDA, will be broadly defined as to include the meat packing industry, the processing industry. It'll work to try to allow undocumented workers who are here, allow them to participate in the new program, but again, find a way to keep them as legal as possible under the new program. It only modifies the current H-2A program. It does not replace it, and provides the idea what it would provide a 12-month visa for temporary workers with a contract. However, those workers every 30 days would need to, or excuse me, they would provide a 12-month visa, and then after that 12 months, they'd have to go back to their country of origin for 30 days before they could come back. And we thought that at the American Farm Bureau level, that was a good way to try to work through this program. The visa would be 11 months for a temporary worker that does not have a direct contract. Again, it's a way to try to maintain a legal workforce, protect individual ag producers who are reliant upon the immigrant workforce, and then also find a way to modify and make sure that agriculture is a part of the larger immigration discussion. Because it appears right now, if you look at the debate, they talk about a worker proposal, but agriculture is not necessarily always included in that. And so our next charge will be to continue to work hard to make sure that agriculture and an agriculture work program is a part of the general immigration conversation. So that's what I have on the national level. Feel free to ask any questions you've got on the things that I talked about or anything else.
And we do have a couple of questions for you, Jordan, and they're both on the Farm Bill. The first one is, how loud is the attack on funding of crop insurance becoming in Washington?
It continues to increase. And I think that when you look at what we've been able to do in terms of the new farm program or the new farm bill that we've tried to work through for the next 5 years, I think crop insurance funding is safe. And quite frankly, we've been able to even add a little bit of funding to federal crop insurance. But that will not last forever. And groups like the Environmental Working Group and others have been very focused in on crop insurance spending. And because once direct payments go away, once they win there, they set their sights on the next one, and that's federal crop insurance. And so it'll be important for us to continue to try to talk to folks and let folks understand. You know, we had a member, Ben Steffen from Richardson County, went to D.C. and testified in front of the Senate Ag Committee and talked about how, you know, the thing that you all know, but that federal crop insurance doesn't pay out every year. And it's an insurance policy just like any other insurance policy. And so it's going to be our charge, I guess to use a similar phrase, to continue to try to remind the general public that this is an insurance policy. It's not just a federal government handout to farmers. And we're going to have to work hard to protect it, because we may be safe this year. The next farm bill, if we get there, if we actually have another farm bill debate in 5 years, 10 years, whatever it may be, it will be under attack. It most definitely will. The rumblings have started. It continues to get louder.
Okay. The next question is also on the farm bill, and you mentioned this a little bit, but is a food stamp program on the table, and how serious are they about that?
So you look at, so I'll back up a little bit to sequestration. The SNAP program and and the SNAP program is not subject to sequestration, so that one's off the table. The WIC program will be subject to sequestration, so you will see a trim there. Fast forward to the Farm Bill, you will see a trim to the SNAP program. The question will be how large. It was very difficult to get $4 billion in savings on the Senate side, extraordinarily difficult. And there were folks that voted against it on the Senate side, specifically because of that $4 billion cut. On the House side, you had Republicans that voted against the Farm Bill in the Ag Committee because $16 billion wasn't enough. And so it's a delicate balance of trying to find some savings there, but also try to attract enough votes to try to get it to pass. And the question before it gets asked, I think everyone knows this, but I guess the question has kind of increasingly happened here and there as to why we don't just separate farm programs from nutrition programs. And I would say the answer to that is because if you think it's hard passing farm legislation now, it gets an awful lot harder if you separate the two. And my example is always Sheila Jackson Lee from inner city Austin or Houston, Texas, I can't remember. But Sheila Jackson Lee, again, very urban congresswoman, very left-leaning, always votes for a farm bill. And the only reason she votes for a farm bill is because of the nutrition side. If you remove that, finding the votes to get farm programs funded will be extraordinarily difficult. And so the cuts to nutrition, I think you'll see some. They won't be that large, and when you look at the overall program, but they'll at least, I think, finding that balance is going to be continue to be difficult to try to get a farm bill passed, which was one of the main reasons it didn't get passed last time, was because of the nutrition cuts. It was too much for some, not enough for others.
Okay, another question, kind of staying on the farm bill topic, because we have a couple on immigration as well too. But we're going to skip one and then get over, and then we'll get back to that one. But where does some form of a safety net stand in the farm program?
In terms of, so what we came up with on the Senate side was the federal crop insurance program. That is your main component. The direct payment program was then replaced by a new revenue program, a shallow loss revenue program that had, and again I can get into the specifics if people really want me to, but it had a shallow loss band. Basically, the target would be hit. You would receive a payment if you received a revenue loss of 11 to 21%. That is the band in which you would actually receive a payment. And the percentage of coverage would be based upon on what level of coverage you signed up for, whether that be on the county level coverage or on the individual, the farm level coverage. You could sign up for both, and your coverage level would be determined based upon which part you sign up for. But that's it. The Senate side, you have federal crop insurance, you have a shallow loss revenue program. On the House side, they passed legislation to replace direct payments and have a shallow loss program that was somewhat similar to the Senate side. A couple changes here and there. The payment band was roughly the same. The individual farm level coverage was not available. But you could choose between that, an updated or a new revenue program that would replace the acre program, or you could choose for southern producers, or any producers quite frankly, but it was mainly put in there for southern producers, a new updated target price program. With updated target prices, I think corn was in the range of $3.90, $3.92, something like that. I'd have to look again. And so you could choose between one or the other. But the kicker on the House side was this item called supplemental coverage option, which is an additional crop insurance product that would allow a farmer to buy up their crop insurance up to 75 to 90%. A farmer could buy up to 75% if you chose the revenue option. If you chose the target price option, a farmer could buy up their federal crop insurance up to 90% at a higher subsidized rate on both sides. So it's a bump up in crop insurance that's subsidized at 70%. And so you'd probably see a lot of farmers look toward that program, even if they didn't raise southern commodities. Corn and soybean farmers might like that 90% coverage buy-up option. And so that's what existed in replace of direct payments, I guess. Hopefully that answers the question.
Okay. This next one is maybe a little bit more of a statement. Jordan, we'll see if there's anything you want to address in this, but it is the H-2A program is very difficult, and we've gone to hiring a rep just to do the footwork. The fine for not doing the paperwork is extremely out of sight, and just curious if we've ever looked through that process and what a nightmare it is compared to several years ago.
The H-2A program is extraordinarily problematic, and that's why we've tried to, and I think that's why you've seen a push to try to, and I think that's why we see immigration reform happen this year, because programs and the immigration system is quite frankly broken in this country, because you have employers who can work through the H-2A program and they get a Social Security number, and they can only verify whether or not the Social Security number exists rather than who actually's name is on the Social Security number. It's a problematic system. And so I think there is the political will to do something about this program and do something with the immigration issue generally. And again, as I said, the agricultural workforce has not it has not been the larger part, or has not been a part of the larger conversation every time that it's brought up. And so we continue to have hope that, you know, the coalition that we've put together, it comes from a lot of different folks on both the left and the right of the issue, and we think there's a chance that we can include our agricultural guest worker proposal in order for us to try to fix the system for agriculture. Hopefully it's a part of the larger conversation.
The next question is, what are the chances, there's been a lot of talk of gun control legislation, and what are you hearing, what are the chances of getting, as the way the questions were, goofy gun control laws?
Goofy gun control laws. You know, actually I was reading an article this morning that talked about how the sequestration debate has really pushed gun control to the back burner, and it's pushed everything to the back burner, quite frankly. And I think that when you look at the statements that have been made, I mean, it's gotten extraordinarily partisan on gun control, as everyone would expect it would be. I think that what we see happening, if we see anything pass at all, it's going to be this universal background check. Is most likely the extent of what you get, and I think that's even going to be difficult because I just don't. I mean, the House has really dug their heels in on any assault weapons ban, on more regulation on gun shows and everything like that that's being talked about on the Senate side. You might see legislation passed. I just have a very hard time seeing anything besides this universal background check issue. I have a very hard time seeing anything else pass.
Okay, now I'm going to get my mic back on. I don't think I had my mic on that time. But is there any other questions for national issues for Jordan? I do see we do have a state issue question. So if there's any other national questions, well, I think we'll go ahead and let Jay or Jessica take this next one. the question is how do you propose to replace or real estate tax, property taxes in rural counties? Because property taxes are a strong funding source for counties, so we're going to have a reduction. Is there any replacements, I guess, would be what I'm looking at in that question.
You stumped me. Jay has some thoughts. I'm going to let him. I'm still a little fuzzy from being out the last couple of days.
Yeah, well, what the question, Jay, was about replacing local property tax.
Yeah.
And I guess over the years we've advocated that there's we've always thought there's got to be a three-leg stool when it comes to funding both local and state government, and we don't advocate for the complete elimination of property taxes, but what we've always been concerned with was the undue burden on obviously farmers and ranchers, and particularly when it comes to funding schools. But there's a couple different ways we've approached that. One is through our policy supports local funding sources like a local income tax or broadening or local sales tax where everybody helps pay for that local school or community colleges, and so that's one way. Obviously the other way then is to look at some state tax resources either through increased state aid or direct property tax relief, the credit program, those kind of avenues. So our policy is willing to look at, we don't support sales tax on services, but we're willing to have the discussion if it looks like sales tax on services or broadening the sales tax base to include other consumer goods would be directed towards property tax relief, and that's the discussion we're willing to have.
There we go. Get my mic back on. Okay. Are there any other questions? Not seeing any other questions at this point, but we do have just a few minutes left. Want to reiterate again, thanks everyone for being on this morning. Also, just to let you know, we appreciate, and hopefully these webinars are working out for you. We had quite a few people on this morning. Okay, something else talking to me. We are hoping to do this again in a couple of weeks. We don't have the date set, so pay attention or watch your emails. We will be sending out reminders on how you can get signed up for this webinar again. Also would look for input, how it's working on your end, if these webinars are important. The last one we did was in the evening. This one we did in the morning. Let us know what works better for you. If evening works better or morning, you know, we had some communication from folks that you know, could make it one time or another. So let us know that information. We will let you know when the next one is going to be, and also just follow up that Thursday is the hearings on the two bills for property taxes. And if you can come to Lincoln, we would certainly encourage that, and let us know. And otherwise, take action on the action item. Yeah, and that's and Jay Rempe just reminded me something else. So we are looking for testimonial type information on what property taxes has done on your operations in the last couple of years as we're preparing our testimony for Thursday. So if you have any of that information you would like to share, jot us an email to either jrempe, jr@nefb.org, jayr@nefb.org, or you can send it to any of us and we will get it there. They can also, and Craig Head is in the room, he also said you can message us on Facebook with any of that information. So don't see any other questions, so I'm going to turn it over to Steve to close out this webinar this morning.
Well, I certainly would reiterate all the things that Jay had just mentioned about upcoming events and the need for you to participate. And thank you very much for attending this morning. Hopefully this has been a good time for you. And as Jay said, please let us know of anything that we can do to make this process better. Just one last reminder, tomorrow we have a drought management and legislative issues seminar in Valentine. For those of you who are in the Valentine area, that begins at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and the meeting will be at the Peppermill Restaurant. We'll end with supper that in the evening, so that'll probably be fairly early in the evening. We're scheduled to be from 1 to 5, and so we'll try to have our meal then at a pretty good time and get you on your way. So certainly, if you're able to be in Valentine, great meeting with state climatologist Al Dutcher and Custer County Extension Agent Troy Walls. So if there's nothing else, I don't see anything else. Again, thank you very much, and we'll look forward to being on with you next time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks everybody so much. Have a great rest of the day.
I feel like we should have some intro music and some